The desert didn't forgive mistakes. It buried them. Eli Ward knew that better than most. He rode alone to the crack basin, his horse kicking up a ghost trail of red dust that drifted behind him like smoke from a dying fire. The sun sat mean and low, a copper coin in a blood-orange sky. Every hoofbeat echoed like a question he didn't want to answer. He hadn't spoken to another soul in 3 days. Didn't plan to. The deed to a crumbling shack out in the dry creek basin burned in his coat pocket. $10 and a bottle of whiskey had bought him all the solitude he could stand. Maybe too much. He crossed what used to be a stream bed, the ground split and thirsty. Only the wind moved, whispering through the brittle mesquite. Somewhere a hawk screeched, sharp, lonesome sound, and Eli's eyes flicked skyward. The birds circled once, twice, before vanishing into the glare. He spat dust, tugged the reins, and muttered to his horse. "Almost there, boy. Just a roof, a bed, and no damn ghosts." But ghosts didn't need doors. They came riding in through memory. By the time he saw the shack, twilight had settled, painting the desert in bruised purples and golds. The building slouched against a hillside, one corner cave in, the roof patched with rusted tin. A fence leaned like it was drunk, yet there was something about the quiet that soothed him. He swung off his horse, boots crunching over sand and bone. The air smelled of sage and smoke. He pushed open the door, it groaned like an old man, and stepped inside. The shack was one room, a cot, a table, a dead lantern, and dust thick as regret. He struck a match, lit a stub of candle, and stood still. That's when he noticed the tracks in the dust. Small boot prints. Fresh. His hand went to his gun. He crouched low, scanning corners. The floor creaked beneath his weight. Something rattled near the hearth, a scorpion scuttling back into shadow. "Hell," he breathed. "Someone's been here." He found a scrap of cloth near the window, soft, floral-printed, a woman's kerchief. He turned it over in his calloused hand. The faintest scent of lavender still clung to it, ghost-like. He set it down slow, his brow furrowed. Outside, the wind picked up, whispering through the cracks in the boards. It almost sounded like breathing. That night, Eli lay awake on the cot, staring at the ceiling where moonlight cut thin silver bars across the wood. He thought about the footprints, the kerchief, the faint warmth in the ashes by the fire pit. Someone had been here, maybe still was. He closed his eyes and told himself it didn't matter. He'd come here to disappear, not to care. But the desert has a way of testing a man's lies. The morning broke hard and bright. Sunlight spilled across the basin, burning away the night's chill. Eli woke with grit in his mouth and a restlessness he couldn't shake. He saddled his horse and took a bucket, heading toward the river that cut a shallow scar through the canyon half a mile east. The air shimmered with heat, even though it wasn't yet noon. Cicadas buzzed, relentless. The closer he got, the more uneasy he felt. The land was too still. No birds, no tracks, except those small ones again, pressed into the damp sand near the riverbank. He crouched beside them, two sets close together, bare feet. His jaw tightened. He rose slowly, hand resting on the butt of his coat. Then he heard it. Laughter. He froze mid-step. The sound drifted through the reeds, soft, lilting, human. A splash followed. Another laugh, lighter this time, echoing like music off the canyon walls. Eli moved closer, quiet as shadow, pushing through the tall grass until he saw them. Two women, young, maybe in their 20s, stood waist-deep in the shallows, the morning sun turning the water into rippled glass around them. Their clothes lay in a neat pile on the rocks, and their dark hair gleamed wet in the light. One of them splashed the other, playful and free in a way Eli hadn't seen in years. He forgot to breathe. For a moment, he was in the desert. He was somewhere before all the ugliness, all the loss, back when laughter still meant something. Then one of them turned. Her eyes met his. Wide, startled, fierce. "Who's there?" Her voice cracked the silence. The younger one gasped and ducked down into water. The older sister, tall and sharp-featured, moved with sudden purpose. She reached for something on the riverbank, a rifle. Eli's heart jumped. He raised both hands, stepping into view slowly. I don't mean no harm, miss. Keep your hand where I can see him, she snapped. He froze. The barrel of her rifle caught a gleam of sunlight, aimed dead center at his chest. I just came for water, he said evenly. Didn't know anyone was here. The younger sister peeked up from the water, eyes wide and frightened. The older one kept her aim steady. This land ain't yours. It is now, Eli said quietly. Bought the deed myself. Shack up yonder. They exchanged a glance, quick, uncertain. The older sister hesitated, then lowered the gun just an inch. You alone? Always, Eli muttered. A long silence stretched between them, filled only by the river's murmur. Finally, the older one said, You best keep to your shack. We'll be gone soon enough. Wasn't planning to bother you, he said, backing away. But the desert's rough on its own. Be careful where you bed down. He turned to go, and her voice stopped him. Wait. He looked back. She studied him. Dusty clothes, sunburnt skin, tired eyes. There was something cautious in her stare, but not cruel. You got food? She asked. Some beans and jerky. A pause. Then maybe we'll talk later. Eli nodded once and walked back toward the shack, pulse still thudding. By the time he reached the porch, he caught himself looking over his shoulder, half expecting to see them watching. But the river lay quiet again, glimmering under the harsh sun, as if none of it had happened. Still, when he stepped inside, he could smell lavender again, stronger this time. By dusk, the wind shifted cold. The desert changed after dark. Shadows grew teeth. Eli lit a fire, ate in silence, and sat by the open door, listening to the coyotes howl far off. He couldn't shake the image of the two women, the older one's fierce glare, the younger's trembling hands. They didn't belong out here, not alone. He told himself it wasn't his concern. Still, when he heard the crunch of footsteps outside, he didn't reach for his gun right away. A soft knock came at the door. Eli rose, heart steady but alert. He opened it slow. The older sister stood there, rifle slung over her shoulder, her hair braided back. Behind her, the younger one clutched a bundle of blankets. We're staying till morning, the older said bluntly. You don't like it, you can sleep outside. Eli stepped aside. Fair enough. They entered cautiously. The younger one, Clara, he'd soon learn, set the blankets near the hearth. The older introduced herself as Nora. Her voice carried the weight of command, like someone used to being obeyed. Eli watched as they settled in. Clara shivered, glancing at the door as if afraid something lurked beyond it. Nora noticed. They followed our tracks, Nora said to Eli. A gang. 5 men. Killed our pa 3 weeks back, burned the wagon, took what they pleased. Eli's stomach turned. You think they're still after you? I don't think, Nora said. I know. Silence stretched. Eli tossed another log into the fire. Sparks flew up the chimney, hissing. You plan to keep running. We plan to live. There was steel in her tone, the kind that made him nod in respect. He'd known men with less backbone who called themselves soldiers. Clara looked up then, her eyes big and tired. You fought before, didn't you? Eli hesitated. Once. Long time ago. She smiled faintly. You look like someone who's seen too much. Maybe, he said softly. Maybe not enough. That drew a small laugh from her, the first sound of warmth in that cold shack. Outside, thunder rolled low across the basin, though no rain came, just the sky grumbling its warning. Eli shifted his chair, watching the doorway. You can stay the night. But if those men show, we fight together. I don't run. Nora nodded once. Didn't figure you for the running kind. The fire crackled, throwing long shadows up the walls. The 3 of them sat in uneasy silence, bound by the same unspoken fear. Somewhere beyond the hills, a coyote yipped, answered by another closer and closer still. Eli reached for his rifle, laid it across his knees. Clara whispered, Do you think they'll find us? Eli met her gaze. If they do, he said quietly, they won't live to tell it. The wind moaned through the cracks, carrying the scent of sage and rain that would never fall. Nora rose, checked the window slit, then drew the curtain tight. Her face softened just a little as she looked back at him. "Thank you, Eli Ward." He blinked. "Didn't tell you my name." She gave a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's on the deed nailed to your wall." Eli looked over. She was right. The old parchment hung crooked near the door, his name scrawled in faded ink. She'd seen it when she came in. He let out a quiet breath, half a laugh. "Guess there ain't much you don't notice." "Out here," Nora said, turning back to the fire, "you learn quick or you die." Outside, a horse neighed in the distance. Faint but real. Eli stood up fast. When a window. Nothing but dark horizon and wind. Still, the hair on his arms rose. He turned to Nora. "You hear that?" She nodded slowly. "They found us." The fire popped loud, spitting sparks into the air. Clara gasped, clutching her sister's arm. Eli stepped to the door, pulling his rifle from its rest. "Stay behind me." But when he opened the door, there was nothing there, just the empty desert stretching out, endless and watching. He scanned the ridges, the moon just breaking over the rocks, painting everything in silver. Then he heard it again, hoofbeats, distant, echoing. He shut the door, slid the bolt, and turned back to the sisters. "Get some rest," he said grimly. "Tomorrow we plan for worse." The wind howled harder, rattling the windows. The candle flickered low. As the fire dimmed, Eli sat awake long into the night, listening to the hoofbeats fade and return, like the desert breathing in its sleep. He thought of ghosts and of debts not yet paid. By the time dawn crept pale through cracks, he'd made up his mind. If trouble came, he'd meet it head-on. By morning, the air was still heavy with dust and silence. Eli Ward woke before dawn, the faint glow of the fire dying beside him. Nora was already awake, sitting near the window slit with her rifle balanced across her knees. Her hair caught a thin line of light as the first breath of sunrise touched the shack. "You don't sleep much," Eli muttered, pulling on his boots. "Not since they killed Pa," she said flatly, eyes never leaving the horizon. He poured coffee grounds into the dented pot, added water, and set it over the coals. The smell filled the shack, bitter, grounding. Clara stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about a wagon. Eli looked over, watching her face twitch beneath the flicker of morning light. Too young, he thought. Too soft for this country. Nora finally spoke. "We'll move at noon. They don't travel under full sun. Not out here." "You got a place in mind?" "South, beyond the dry ridge. Heard there's a ranch that takes in travelers." Eli stirred the fire, sparks jumping. "Ain't nothing out there but bones and mirage." She turned her gaze on him, sharp and unreadable. "Better than staying where we're hunted." Eli sipped his coffee, the heat biting his tongue. "You think they'll track you this far?" "I know they will." Her certainty hung in the air, as heavy as the smell of smoke. Eli didn't press. He'd seen that look before, on men who knew death had their scent. Clara woke then, blinking sleep from her eyes. She smiled faintly when she saw the coffee. "You made breakfast," she said, voice soft and hopeful, as if she'd forgotten where she was. Eli nodded, awkward. "Ain't much, but it's warm." She sipped from the tin cup, wincing. "Tastes like burnt leather." He grinned. "That's how you know it's real." For a moment, the tension cracked. Nora even smiled, barely, but then the smile faded, her eyes flicking toward the distant hills. She rose abruptly, stepping outside. Eli followed her. The wind carried the faintest sound, low, rhythmic, like thunder too far to see. Hooves. Nora heard it too. She stiffened. "They found us," she whispered. Eli's gut tightened. "How many?" She shaded her eyes. 4, maybe 5. Dust cloud small, but they're coming fast. Eli drew a slow breath. The sun climbed higher, cruel and bright. "Then we don't run," he said. "We make a stand." Nora turned toward him, the disbelief in her face flickering into something else. Respect, maybe. "You die for 2 strangers?" He met her eyes. "No, but I'll fight for what's right." She studied him for a long second, then nodded once. "Then we fight." The desert turned into a furnace by afternoon. Heat shimmered above the rocks, bending the horizon. Eli and Nora crouched behind the broken fence line, rifles in hand, while Clara loaded extra rounds inside the shack. "Keep low," Eli muttered. "When they ride in, aim for the lead horse. Break the charge." Nora nodded, steady as a mountain. "And if we don't, then you shoot till you can't." They waited. The silence stretched thin until it almost hummed. Then dust appeared on the ridge. 5 riders, black shapes against the glare. Eli could feel his pulse in his fingertips. He recognized the lead rider before the man even got close, tall, lean, coat flapping open like wings. "Brant Cole." "Hell," Eli whispered. Nora glanced at him. "You know him?" "Yeah," Eli said. "Used to ride with him. Before I learned what kind of man he was." Brant's laughter carried on the wind. He raised a hand, signaling his men to fan out. "Ward, you son of a bitch. Heard you took up squatting on my land." Eli shouted back, "Ain't yours, Brant." "Never was." Brant grinned, teeth white against his tan face. "Everything out here is mine if I want it, including them pretty girls I heard screaming last time." Eli's knuckles whitened around his rifle. Nora's breath hitched, fury flashing across her face. Brant lifted his revolver skyward and fired once. The shot cracked like thunder. His men charged. "Now!" Eli barked. The first volley tore through the air. Dust exploded near the fence. A horse shrieked, and one rider tumbled hard into the sand. The others scattered, returning fire. Bullets smacked into the shack's walls, showering Clara with splinters. She ducked, reloading as fast as her trembling hands allowed. Eli and Nora fired again, sharp, methodical. She was quick, steady, eyes narrowing with each shot. One outlaw went down by the water's edge, blood clouding the shallows. Brant dismounted, taking cover behind a boulder. His voice rang out, mocking. "Ain't like you, Eli. Thought you gave up playing hero." "Maybe I did," Eli shouted back, "but you brought me reason to start again." Brant laughed, the sound harsh and cruel. "You always were a fool for lost causes." The fight raged on. Heat, smoke, gunpowder. Eli ducked as a bullet whined past his ear, slamming into the post behind him. He rolled, fired once, and saw another rider fall. 3 left. Inside. Nora yelled, "They're circling." Eli dashed to the shack, diving through the door as bullets shattered glass and wood. Clara screamed, covering her head. "Stay down," he barked, crouching by the window. He caught sight of Brant moving closer, his revolver gleaming. Then everything went still, just for a moment. The world shrank to the slow tick of his heartbeat. He saw Nora on the opposite window, reloading with practiced calm. Their eyes met, a silent agreement between 2 souls who'd stopped running. Eli stood, aimed, and fired. Brant's hat flew off his head. The outlaw ducked, cursing, returning fire in a frenzy. The shot caught Eli's shoulder, spinning him half around. He bit down on the pain, grunting. Nora fired next, her bullet slamming into one of Brant's men, sending him crashing backward. 2 left. Then silence again. Smoke hung thick. Eli pressed a hand to his shoulder, feeling the warmth of blood. "You good." "Better than you," Nora said grimly. He laughed once, breathless. "Story of my life." The quiet broke when a figure stumbled into view, one of Brant's men clutching his gut. Eli raised his rifle, but the man collapsed before he could shoot. Brant's voice rose again. Hoarse now. "You think this ends here, Ward? You can't bury me twice." Eli stepped out of the doorway, ignoring the blood soaking his sleeve. "Ain't planning to." He fired. The bullet struck Brant's leg. The outlaw dropped to one knee, fury twisting his face. He fired back wildly, missed, then limped toward his horse. His remaining man helped him mount, and within seconds they were gone, retreating into the endless desert. Eli lowered his rifle. Smoke drifted upward, curling into the heat. His breath came slow, heavy. Nora emerged from the shadows, rifle still raised just in case. Clara followed, wide-eyed, her face pale as ash. "They gone," she whispered. "For now," Eli said, "but not forever." He looked toward the river. The water was red. The shack was quiet again, save for crackle of fire and the soft sobbing from Clara as she washed blood from her hands. Nora sat by the table, silent, her expression carved from stone. Eli tore a strip of cloth from his coat and tied it around his bleeding shoulder. The pain throbbed deep, but he welcomed it. It meant he was still alive. "You going to tell me what that was about?" Nora finally asked. Eli leaned back, jaw clenched. "Brant and I rode together once. I was Bounty. He was Muscle. We hunted men for pay. He didn't care if they were guilty. I did." Nora's eyes flicked to his. "What happened?" "I let him go once. Should have pulled the trigger. Thought mercy might change him." Eli looked down at the bandage. "My brother paid for that mistake. Brant killed him 2 winters later." Clara gasped softly. Nora didn't. She just stared at him, something fierce and understanding burning behind her gaze. "So this ain't just about us," she said. "No," Eli admitted, "but it sure as hell is now." Silence settled like dust. Outside, the light faded, turning the desert gold, then gray. Eli rose, wincing at his wound, and stepped to the doorway. The horizon stretched empty, but he knew Brant wasn't finished. Nora joined him. "He'll come back," she said. "Yeah," Eli murmured. "And next time he won't leave again." The air between them crackled. Fear, anger, something else neither dared name. Nora looked up at him. "You could ride out, leave this behind." Eli shook his head. "Ran long enough. Besides, I ain't much good at starting over. Might as well end something right." Nora studied him for a moment, then turned back inside. "Then we plan. At dawn we fortify. I know his kind. He'll hit again before sunrise." "Reckon you're right." Clara looked between them, voice small but steady. "Then I'll fight too." Nora spun, eyes wide. "You'll do no such." But Eli cut in softly. "Let her. Fear'll kill her faster than a bullet if she don't face it." Nora hesitated, then nodded, slow and reluctant. "Fine, but you stay behind cover, understand?" Clara managed a trembling smile. "Yes, ma'am." The night deepened. The fire burned low. They ate what little was left, beans, stale bread, silence. Eli cleaned his rifle, motion slow and deliberate. Nora mended the curtain over the window, her fingers deft despite the tremor in them. Clara hummed softly, some half-remembered lullaby that filled the air with a fragile warmth. Eli watched them, the strength in one, the innocence in the other, and felt something stir he hadn't felt in years. Not peace, but purpose. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "You two ever think about staying put? Making this place something more than a memory?" Nora gave a short laugh. "Out here? Ain't much room for dreams." "Maybe," Eli said, "but this shack stood longer than any man I've known. Maybe it's waiting for someone to call a home." She looked at him then, long and thoughtful. "You always talk like you're half preacher, half fool." He smiled faintly. "Ain't far off." Outside, the wind rose again, carrying the faint echo of distant hoofbeats, soft but certain. Eli's eyes met Nora's. "They're not done." She nodded once. "Then neither are we." The firelight flickered, throwing their shadows long across the walls. 3 figures bound by fate, by fear, by the thin line between survival and surrender. And somewhere beyond that broken horizon, Brant Cole rode with vengeance in his heart, the desert wind at his back. Tomorrow would bring blood, and Eli Ward was ready to pay what was owed. The night settled heavy over the desert, a thick, moonless shroud that swallowed every shape and sound. Luke sat by the dying fire, the glow trembling against the walls of the shack. Outside, the wind moaned across the plains, dragging the scent of rain and gunpowder. His rifle rested across his knees, his jaw tight as a rope knot. Mara and Ella lay close together on the floor, wrapped in a single blanket. Sleep had finally taken them, but it was the uneasy kind, light, tremulous, haunted. Luke's hand brushed the scar along his cheek. The firelight caught it, turned it into a pale brand of memory. He'd earned it years ago, some nameless border skirmish when he thought dying for a cause was noble. Now, In this lonely shack with two half-starved sisters under his roof, he understood something truer. Dying wasn't hard. Living with purpose, that was the real trial. A horse snorted in the dark. Luke froze. His eyes cut toward the window. He heard it again, soft, rhythmic hooves. A whistle followed, low and mocking, echoing through the wind. "Damn it," he whispered. He rose quietly, grabbed his hat, and stepped outside. The air was cold enough to bite. The desert stretched wide and black, its silence broken only by the whisper of dry brush and the occasional cry of a coyote. But out beyond the ridge, movement. 3 riders, faint silhouettes, creeping like shadows toward the shack. Luke crouched, his pulse steadying. He'd known this might come. The raiders hadn't forgotten. Men like them never did. They'd smelled weakness, and they were circling back for blood or loot. Maybe both. He turned toward the doorway. "Mara," he said softly. She stirred, eyes blinking open, hand instinctively going to Ella's shoulder. "What is it?" "They're here." Mara's face drained of color. "How many?" "3 I can see. Maybe more hiding in the dark." Ella sat up, clutching her shawl. "What do we do?" Luke's voice was calm, but inside him something fierce sparked alive. "We fight smart. You stay down. Keep quiet. If I fall, you run north toward the ridge. Don't look back." Mara shook her head sharply. "We're not leaving you." He gave her a faint smile. "You might not have a choice." A shot cracked through the night, splintering the doorframe beside him. Mara screamed, dropping to the floor. Luke dug behind the table, firing back once. One clean, sharp echo that cut to the wind. A shout followed from outside. "Reckon you thought you could hide, Cowboy." A voice called, slurred and cruel, "You got something belongs to us." Luke's jaw clenched. "Ain't got nothing here but trouble," he muttered. He fired again, glass shattering as the window blew out. A man's cry echoed, then silence. The others ducked low behind rocks. The air stank of burnt powder. Mara crawled toward him, grabbing a handful of cartridges. "They won't stop," she said, voice trembling. "They'll burn the place if they can't take it." "I know," Luke said. His gaze flicked to the half-empty canteen, the door barely hanging on its hinges, the small wooden cross carved into mantel, a keepsake from his wife, buried far off in Texas soil. Everything in his life had been running, fighting, losing. But this shack, these 2 sisters, it felt different. For once, he wasn't just surviving. He was protecting something worth the pain. Thunder rolled across the desert. The rain began, cold and sparse at first, then harder, pelting the tin roof. The sound swallowed everything. Then movement at the back wall. A shadow. Luke turned just as a raider kicked the door wide, soaked and wild-eyed, pistol raised. Luke didn't think. He lunged. The 2 men crashed into the table, with splintering beneath them. The gun fired once, wild, the bullet grazing Luke's shoulder. Pain tore through him, hot and immediate, but he drove his fist into the man's jaw, then again, until the raider went limp. "Luke!" Mara's voice pierced the roar of rain. He looked up just in time to see another silhouette at the window, rifle aimed straight at her. He fired. The man dropped, falling back into the mud outside. Then silence again, broken only by the hiss of rain and Luke's ragged breathing. He limped to the doorway, eyes scanning the darkness. 2 bodies lay still. The 3rd rider already fleeing into the storm, his horse's hooves fading into nothing. Luke lowered his rifle. His shoulder bled, but he barely felt it. He turned back toward the sisters, the faint firelight painting their faces with gold. Mara was trembling but alive, Ella clinging to her. "It's over," Luke said quietly. "For now." Mara's eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but something softer. "You saved us." Luke gave a slow nod. "Guess we all saved each other." The rain eased, leaving behind the scent of wet earth and ash. Luke sank beside the fire again, staring into the embers. The fight was done, but the weight of it lingered in his bones, the old ghost of every battle he thought he'd left behind. He felt a hand on his arm. Mara knelt beside him, eyes glimmering in the faint light. "You don't have to keep fighting alone," she whispered. He looked at her, really looked, at the dirt smudging her cheek, the fierce light in her eyes, the way she held her sister close even after all the terror. And for the first time in a long while, Luke Dawson felt something like peace stirring in his chest. The storm had passed, but dawn was coming. The desert woke slow and soft, as if afraid to disturb what the night had taken. Sunlight crept over the ridges, washing the valley in gold. Steam rose from the wet earth, and the air smelled of sage and rain. Luke stepped out of the shack, every muscle sore, his bandaged shoulders stiff. The world looked cleaner somehow, emptied of menace, rinsed of fear. He could see for miles, the horizon sharp and endless, and for once it didn't feel like a threat. Behind him, the sisters emerged. Mara's hair caught the sunlight, glinting copper. Ella followed, barefoot, her small hand gripping the doorframe. They looked fragile, yet unbroken. Two souls who had endured too much and somehow still found grace. Luke turned toward the burned patch of ground where the raiders had fallen. He'd buried them before sunrise, quiet and unmarked. The earth would take them, same as it took everything out here. But he'd marked one grave with flat stone, not for them, but for what he'd finally let go. Mara joined him, silent for a while. "You could leave," she said finally. "Ride out. No one would blame you." He watched the hawk wheel above the canyon. "Could," he said. "But I reckon I'm tired of running." She smiled faintly. "You thinking of staying?" "Thinking I might." He turned toward the shack, its patched roof, the sagging porch, the corral half broken but still standing. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Place needs work," he said. Mara looked around, a slow smile blooming. "Then we'd best start." Ella laughed softly, a sound that broke through the quiet like birdsong. She ran toward the river, barefoot in the mud, her laughter echoing against the rocks. Mara followed, gathering her skirts. Luke watched them go, the same river where he'd first seen them weeks ago, wild and free beneath the sun. He remembered that moment, the shock, the awkwardness, the sheer absurdity of it, and how far they'd come since. Strangers once. Now, something closer. Luke sat on the porch steps, lit a match, and watched the smoke curl upward. For years, he'd thought the frontier was a punishment, a place for men to hide from their sins. But maybe it was more than that. Maybe it was a chance to start over, to build something honest from the ashes. Mara's voice called out across the water. "You coming, cowboy?" He smiled, slow and easy. "Reckon I am." He walked down to the riverbank, boots sinking in the wet earth. Mara stood at the edge, sunlight spilling over her shoulders. She looked at him the way no one had in years. Not with pity, not with fear, but with trust. "You ever think the land gives people second chances?" she asked. Luke glanced at the horizon, where the light met the hills. "Maybe," he said softly, "but only if you're stubborn enough to take it." The river shimmered like glass. Birds sang. The world was quiet again. And for the first time since he'd buried his past, Luke Dawson felt alive. He turned, catching Mara's gaze, and smiled. "Come on, let's see what kind of life we can make out here." She nodded, her hand brushing his. Not shy this time. Together then. "Together," he echoed. As the sun climbed higher, they walked back toward the shack, toward the promise of a new morning, a new life forged in dust and blood and forgiveness. Because sometimes, out here on the frontier, salvation didn't ride in with a preacher or a badge. Sometimes it came barefoot, laughing by the river, reminding a lonely cowboy that home wasn't place. It was the people you'd bleed to protect, and that was worth every fight.